relative mastery and
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, the distinct.
Not very sure. Okay. Right. Anybody has answered to what Anupa is asking?
You can get better at it. So relatively you can improve, but to get to the absolute level is almost like it's a huge task. It's almost, if somebody believes that he's got there, he's obviously in ignorance.
Or maybe relative mastery is like you are able to control your mind but with some deliberation. Whereas absolute mastery is it comes effortlessly to you.
So you have to basically be alert at every point when you're doing something.
So you have to start with relative mastery and hopefully you will achieve absolute
Yeah.
mastery.
It's connected to thoughts.
Okay.
The observing of the thoughts
Okay.
and realizing this before any action.
Okay. So let's look a little bit. There are a lot of things here. So we will look one by one. Okay. But basically you got everything. But my job is to add different depth and different dimensions. Okay. Now he first starts by talking about the word Atma because the value is Atma Vinigraha. So this word Atma in Sanskrit is used in so many different ways, right? He first starts by that. Which Atma are you trying to have mastery over, right? So that you need to understand. So here, what are the different Atma? What he explains is, in fact, it's a Sanskrit. This Atma, people first of all don't even know, they imagine it to be something. What he first starts is saying that it's actually equivalent of English word I am. Right? This is the meaning of the word Atma, I am. Now, what is this I am for you can be very different things. So what are the things that he is talking about in the book?
I know I'm hungry.
Okay, physiological, emotional,
Right? So this I am, suppose you say I am thin. So that refers to the characteristics of the body. Right? Then you can say I am hungry. That is your physiological functions. Then you say I am sad. That is what? Your emotions. So that is your mind. And then you say that I am the greatest. I am really cool. That is your sense of I, right? Which is what in Sanskrit we call ego, or we call sense of I, which is ahankara. But ahankara in Sanskrit, this particular way, it doesn't necessarily mean conceit or ego. What it means is that there is a function of your mind which relates, which actually relates everything that you do at the body level, physiological level, at the mind level, and it gives you a certain narrative about who you are, that sense of I, right? So that is what we call ahankara. So each one has what we call a certain personality, right? So this is the whole personality, the assemblage which makes you, gives you your self-image of who you are. That is what we call ahankara, right? So this is, these are all the different things which can be referred to as Atma. Now, what he also says is that Atma is also used as what? Sat, Chit, Ananda, because according to Vedanta, these are just your incidental attributes. Your true nature is actually that existence, which is awareness, and that has no limitation, so it is limitlessness. So now, when we are talking about mastery, he first says, what are you talking about as Atma here?
The limited.
Excellent. So which given function are we talking about, the mastery over body or physiological function? Right? So that means you need to first identify what are we talking about before we even proceed, right? Because this Atma actually requires no perfection, it's already the whole, right? So that means it is referring to mastery over the mind. So that is his first para when he is first establishing what kind of mastery are we talking about, and that is that of the mind. Okay. Now, the second thing he talks about, the mastery over the mind. Mind itself is what, suppose now you are talking about this is the mastery over mind. Then he talks about the nature of mind. What is the nature of mind? Is there any fixed entity called mind? So what he says is what? There are all these what momentary thoughts. It's an assemblage of different thoughts. So that means itself is assemblage of thoughts. There is not one fixed entity. So as I told you, in one day you can have 60 different thoughts, and actually one thought could be very contradictory to the other. So one day you feel, oh my God, I'm really cool and I'm in control, and next day you feel, oh my God, nothing is working for me. So that means you can have hundreds of different thoughts and all sometimes contradicting each other. So therefore, the next question is, how do you master a mind which itself is changing all the time and itself is something which is fleeting? How do you do it? Right? That is a question. So this is where, what does he say in order to answer that? What does he say?
Through self-knowledge, through understanding the true nature.
No, here he is more talking about mastering the mind now. So he is talking about these assemblage of thought. What do you do? Now, you can say I have 60,000 thoughts, so how am I going to master anything when each one is different from the other? So what am I even trying to master? Do you understand? This could be the question. So what he then says is what? He divides this assemblage of thought into what? Instincts. Right? See, he moves with a certain logic. So he says these different assemblage of thought can be put in, one is what he calls instinctive. That is a category. What is an example of an instinctive thought?
If you're crossing the road and a car comes and you just step back.
Exactly. Right? Or you see something which is a little, let's say, there are people who saw, this World Trade Center collapsing, and they survived, but they had trauma for months after, and they had to see psychologists to get over this trauma, and they would get up at night and they would be just so scared, right? These are all what we call instinctive thinking, because that visual impact of something that you see, there is one part of the brain which is responding to it, and you can't necessarily stop it, right? So this is what we call instinctive brain. Then he talks about so instinctive brain is constantly giving you certain feelings. Then he talks about what? There is a habitual thinking pattern. How is it different from instinctive brain?
That is just because of conditioning, that you do certain things in a certain way.
Right?
You don't really even give it any thought.
Okay, great. So how is this different? Instinct is a situation occurs in front of you and your brain responds. That is what we call instinct. So that means it's just that event and the response. Habitual thinking actually is little different. Why? Because this is a thinking pattern that you have accumulated over years, right? So that means that one thought, what does it mean? One thought feeds on the other thought, and that feeds on the other thought for you to create a story, and then through this story you also learn a certain response. So that means now there is a new stimuli which is coming, and your mind sees this new stimuli not as an independent stimuli, it seizes through this whole pattern, right, which exists, and therefore it gives an immediate response, but that response may not be exactly in keeping with what is required in this situation, but it is colored by all your interpretations in the past and your habits and your orientation. Is it clear? So that is what we call habitual thinking. So we have to know. Sorry? Huh?
Conditions thinking?
Program.
So yeah, so condition. So exactly, over a period of time, we the out the. Okay, now you tell me what you mean by conditioning, because I explained what I thought. Now you are replacing it with another word. So what do you?
It's just another word for exactly what you said.
Okay.
It's just a response that has been followed by previous stimuli.
Yes.
Even if they don't exist now.
Okay, then that's exactly what I'm saying, right? So. So that means, exactly, so that means there is a situation and the mind is capable of assessing that situation as it is. But when it gets colored by the previous pattern, then what happens is that you think that this is what the reality is right now, but in that there is your past conditioning which is making you interpret the events in a certain way, habitual way of thinking. Now he says that these are the two things which the brain is used to. Almost every brain is used to instinctive thinking and habitual thinking. So the mastery over the mind means what? You can't totally stop it, right? It's impossible. Suppose I tell you, oh, but what he's talking about is becoming more deliberate. What it means is that this instinct you are not trying to stop, and this habitual thinking without your control, it happens anyway. The deliberate is what, as a result of this learning, what happens is what, you begin to question the impact of what this instinctive feeling that you have, and also this set pattern which governs your response and assessment of the situation. So that means this is what we call deliberate. So it happens. We are not telling you, see, this is why mastery over the mind, please understand, is not controlling the mind. Why can't you say that it is not controlling of the mind? Why is it not controlling the mind?
It's because you cannot control it.
Right? You can't control the mind because itself is an assemblage of thought. And suppose I ask you, what is going to be your thought 10 minutes from now? You don't even know. So if you don't know, how are you going to control everything that is going to come? So that's why, please understand, mastery is not controlling, right? And itself is not one entity in the first place. These are just flow of thoughts, which themselves last only for a while. But within that transient thoughts, these are the patterns that we have, and these patterns, they don't always serve us. Do you understand? So what we are trying to do is, when that instinctive feeling, suppose when you're crossing the road and that fear comes, you don't need to sit and think about it. But suppose that fear still holds you and you start connecting with, oh God, oh, even my child goes to school now, and then the whole mind goes on that whole imaginary mode. And because of that imagination, now you are paralyzed because you have so much fear with reference to your child for things that have not even happened, right? So this is what we call, so deliberate is, instead of letting these feelings, that feeling at that given point in time could have been very valid. You don't need to change it. Do you understand that? That fear that it gave you at that given point in time saved your life. So you're not trying to eliminate fear. Do you understand? But what you are trying to do is, this fear, which was appropriate at the time that you were crossing the road, is now what? Carried forward, and that is, it continues to rule your mind for imaginary situations which are not even there. Sorry?
Don't get paranoid.
Right? So you get paranoid because then you connect, oh God, oh, what if I had been like this? Oh, and then my son goes here and he crosses the road. So that means it creates a whole big scenario which is only your imagination. And what happens to the fear? It multiplies for things which are not even there. Right? So mastery, deliberate thinking is what? When this happens, you are able to detect it and you are able to correct it. Please don't try to correct it. That's why we never say mastery means don't have fear. We never make these kind of statements. Don't be sad. We don't make these kind of statements because they don't make sense. Right? So this is what
It's just rationalizing basically.
so that means, in fact, detecting, what I want to say is, it's very, very important. What you need in whole correction that you do, right? You need to find the right point of distortion. If you don't find the right point of distortion and correct it there, you again are lost. I'll give you an example, right? So that's why I'm very precise in my language, because I don't want to give general statements. General statements are very dangerous. So I have, I was doing revision of this book, and there came this thing of jealousy. So somebody said, oh, jealousy comes because of comparison, and therefore we should not compare. So is that what I'm saying? No. What happens, see, suppose that means you try to do a correction at a wrong point, right? Suppose you live in this world, is it possible for you not to compare with yourself with anybody? I mean, anywhere you go, right? People they are going to have this thought, oh, she's smarter, or she's this one, she knows French better. That means comparison is something which is, it's so,
It's a normal thought.
exactly. Now suppose I start telling, oh my God, now this is what is a normal thought? I start to think it's wrong, and I try to correct it, and then I said, I should never compare myself with anybody. I'll go crazy. Do you understand? So whole of values is the subtlety of the value is you have to find the right point of distortion, and you have to then correct that. It becomes actually highly liberating. And if you don't find the right point and try to do something and put the rules for yourself, it really, that comparison won't go, and you'll start feeling guilty for having done that, and you'll create an artificial state where you're trying to be something that is impossible to be. Do you understand? So you actually increase your loads if you try to correct at a wrong point. This is why your mind has to become sharp enough, and it has to become clear enough to find the right point of distortion. So that means this fear, which is a carry forward of this, which was a legitimate fear, right? Here it is entering into an imaginary fear. For things which haven't happened, you only need to correct this. You don't need to correct this at all. Is it clear? So that means that is one thing which is what we call mastery. That is what we call deliberate thinking. Deliberate thinking means you detect the right point and you correct it. Now, habitual thinking, which is a set pattern of thinking that you have accumulated over lifetime. So that means carrying forward many, many experiences and making sense of them in one given way. It becomes a little harder to correct because it's a deeper orientation. It is a deeper orientation about how you feel, right? Or how you, suppose you are all, there are people who are, there is one fact, and what is a fact? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? That is a fact. But there is a pattern that happens which makes you anxious. You're always anxious, and anything that is unknown, your mind only creates the worst case scenario, and from that worst case scenario, in order to avoid that worst case scenario, you make the decision. Do you understand? So this is what a pattern which has emerged over years.
So we've been taught hope for the best, plan for the worst. So
Sorry?
hope for the best,
Yes.
plan for the worst.
Plan for the world.
So that's what we're taught.
As
Okay.
though these are like wisdom words, right? I mean, so many messages we buy into, we pass on through WhatsApp and all that, and we don't actually deeply think about it, and we don't even actually say that, hey, what does it all mean? And plan for the worst. Can you, I mean, yes, you need to keep in mind the worst case
Downside,
scenario.
yeah.
It's okay, that's wonderful. But you can't make decisions
Based on that, the
based
worst
only on the worst case scenario and try to
It's a
solve
very
it, right?
negative way of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So because it doesn't actually, why is it not an appropriate way of thinking? Because it doesn't make you see the totality of the situation. Your mind only goes towards
The
The
negative.
worst case scenario.
this one given thing, whether it is negative or it is positive. Positive is equally bad. And you see, just as
Yeah.
negative is
It's
equal,
never good, right?
it's, you know, because you don't see the downsides. So that means this is what we call the patterns, and we make it into such a big thing. Oh, think positive, and people just don't they don't think. Do you understand that? Because again, we are training the mind only to
One
Good side.
in one direction, and we
Which is the
actually
totality.
you need a mind which
Yes.
sees the total picture. So this is because that the total picture is the reality. So the mind which is able to capture the realities as they are without either projecting in one direction or the other, that is the mind that we are trying to acquire, right? So therefore, deliberate thinking is, even in this habitual thinking, to detect what exactly is my habitual pattern which doesn't serve me. That who has to do that job? Each one will have different pattern. Bobby's pattern will be different from Anupa. Anupa will be different from Namrata. So that means I can teach this in the class, but there is a certain reflection required that which is my habitual pattern of thinking. So that's why when Surya does his classes for all these MBA students, he gives them a exercise. So after doing, suppose I introduce this habitual way of thinking, then you have to reflect on what is your habitual pattern, and what are the certain thoughts that come along with it, and then what is the point of correction. So that means you need to think about it, otherwise this just goes, right? So this is what we call deliberate thinking. So deliberate thinking is more with both instinctive and habitual. We need to detect and correct. This is what we call deliberate thinking. Suppose you have corrected it for a length of time, over a period of time, the quality of your mind itself will change. Do you understand that? So the quality of mind will change. Its thoughts will become more and more in keeping with realities. So that is what we call spontaneous. So you can't move from instinctive to this so-called transformed person. You can't move from habitual thinking to this transformed person. You first need to make an effort. And that effort involves detecting both here and correcting, and not just correcting but correcting at the right place. And over a period of time, this is the mind that you will have, and this is what he calls relative mastery, and this he calls what? Absolute mastery. So that means you actually, that becomes you. You are that person, right? So that is what we call absolute mastery. And what he then says is, he makes another statement, which is a nice statement, and he says this absolute mastery, actually, as Bobby was saying, it's not so easy. And in that, for this to happen, you need to have a bigger picture. So that means, just living as an individual, you can actually never have the absolute mastery. this almost requires what? The final vision of the nature of Atma.
So, ask the question.
Okay, the final vision, if it is absolutely clear to you, in order for this final vision to be absolutely clear, you first need relative mastery. Without it, it will never happen. But once this final vision is absolutely clear, the looking at life and the relativity of the situations and the clear thinking becomes almost very spontaneous, very easy. So I'll just tell you one example. It's a very common example, right? You have very exalted people like Bhishma who are sitting in a sabha, and where Draupadi is being disrobed, and they are not some ordinary people, Bhishma and all, and they are trying to do the right thing, but still they can go off. What his thinking was, if Yudhishthir decided to play the game of dice and lose everything, who am I to intervene now? He has to pay for what he has chosen to do. That was his thinking. But where was Krishna's thinking? Krishna's thinking was very different, spontaneous. It didn't take any time for him to figure out that, hey, this is wrong, this has to be stopped. You understand that? And what enables, in so many incidents in Mahabharata, you will see highly exalted people losing perspective. Even Yudhishthira lost perspective. He was being prodded and he also went along, right? So you have very good people losing that perspective, but the wise person seeing the entire reality exactly as they are, which is not only about me, the individual working in the world, but what is the nature of the final reality. So, and the person has worked for it through making all these changes in one's life, and at that point, the confusion doesn't come. So this is what we call absolute. So there is no people struggle. Lord Krishna never actually struggled. That is what is represented by the wise person, right? So this is what we call spontaneous thinking, which cannot come unless you have the final vision of reality. Because in that final vision of reality, there is really a paradigm shift. Paradigm shift from I am that little individual to what all that is here is one reality which manifests in so many different forms. But that's not just some idea that is floating in your mind. That is clearly understood. And that can only be clearly understood when you have actually assimilated all these values and you begin to live like that, and your life becomes highly evolved, right? So only then is possible. So don't think that this final vision is kind of available to everyone, but once this is available, then the quality of mind is such that everything will become much easier than earlier. Bobby, you had a question?
No, I was just thinking that what is that faculty within us which really does this weighing whether it is right or wrong, or this assessment? So is it within us, or is it accessing something beyond that?
No, there is a faculty within us. We have cognitive mind, and that cognitive mind in neurosciences is what we call prefrontal cortex.
Too much in the
So this prefrontal cortex is the one which actually enables us to assess things differently. And what we are trying to do through these classes is what? Strengthen this prefrontal cortex. The way to look at situations again and again. We bring all these values from different standpoints, which actually strengthens our prefrontal cortex, which then enables us to deal with our instinctive and mind and also habitual thinking. Right? So that means you need to, itself can figure out, but that person can also figure out through, for example, you go and see a psychologist, they will also help you in this process. It's not like they will not help you, they will help you. But the knowledge also helps you with a much larger. Can you tell me what are the things in this knowledge which are not there? I really don't mean to make you think that psychology is not useful. It is highly useful, right? They have very sophisticated method to take you from this mode to this mode, right? At the same time, Vedanta is different. How is it different? What are some aspects of Vedanta which are different from just psychology?
Psychologists will only talk about yourself, never about your relationship with the universe and the interconnected.
Excellent.
Right, talk about a relation with other people, but not with like the vision of
The
Yeah.
oneness.
yeah.
Exactly.
Imagine.
I know these are most regularly.
Wonderful.
I really, so it is very, very useful. It helps you cognitively to understand your own patterns, etc., but not any sort of.
Exactly. Right? So here it's only talking,
It tells you about the values.
excellent, right? The values and all that. Psychology doesn't talk about ethics and things like that, you know. So there is a certain difference, even though psychology is important and it is useful in many cases, but it's not exactly the same as the growth that Vedanta talks about, because exactly as Namu said, that the growth that Vedanta talks about is not only in terms of this individual trying to cope with the world in a slightly better way. Right? It is actually the very expansion of this individual into seeing what's his relationship with the universe, what is his relationship with the cause of the universe. These are very large questions, and when you get logical answers to these, not just kind of some beliefs, when you get logical answers, your psyche is changed. It has changed, and it has actually incorporated a much larger vision of things. Then within that larger vision, you choose your actions, right? So this is what we call Atma, spontaneous, right? Now, in order, what he said is, how do you to move from instinctive and habitual to deliberate and spontaneous? There are three things he mentions. What are the three things? Shama, Dhamma, and Samadhi. Okay, so that means how do you there is almost like a roadmap to go from instinctive and habitual to this. So there is first practice which is called Dhamma. What is Dhamma? We have seen it in Tattva-bodha. Anybody remembers?
Choice exercise. Where you can exercise your choice of what you do.
Okay. And Preeti?
Choice of action.
Huh?
Choice of action.
Dhamma is not dharma. Dhamma and Shama we have seen in Tattva-bodha. Dhamma is, suppose your instinct gives you fear, suppose. Right? Now, instead of trying to tell yourself, oh, I should not be afraid, I should not be like this, and trying to put away your thoughts related to fear, you say, yes, I'm feeling fearful. Right? That itself was
Accepting.
Exactly. The first thing is accepting, acknowledging, rather than trying to push it, accepting. And the second step is, you can tell yourself, I am fearful, but there is no rule that I have to act from fear. This is your self-talk to yourself, right? Neither you are in denial of what you are feeling, neither you are trying to brush aside and ignore what you are feeling, but your self-talk tells you, yeah, okay, I have fear, that's okay, there is no drama along with this, but you say, that need not mean that I act from fear. This particular ability of the mind to accept at the same time, not get carried away with whatever is there, this is what we call Dhamma, not Dharma. This is
No,
Dhamma.
that's easier to do with fear. But suppose it's something like being upset about something,
Yeah,
or being
exactly.
jealous.
Yes.
Then it's harder to say like, yes, I'm upset. Maybe my being upset is not the most rational, so I don't operate from that. But that being upset or jealous is likely to come out in some way, right, in your interaction.
So that means that is the second step,
Right.
Shama, right? But now, because there is one thing which is your immediate response, right? So, as situations occur, you can't say, okay, let me think about it and I'll respond to that situation 10 days from now when I've thought about it, right? So that means you have to immediately at that given point in time act. So this is why sometimes my teacher used to say, it's interesting. He says, he said that sometimes a situation is there and it really makes you upset, right? And you acknowledge that I'm upset. He would say, tell them that right now I'm too upset and it has colored my capacity to see.
I'll think
I'll
about
talk to
it
you.
and come back.
Exactly.
But Neema, that's for big things, right? Like you can take a, if you're having some very
Sometimes you just need to take a snap position.
small thing,
small
right?
thing,
And
yeah.
you can't sit and say, I'll talk to you about it later.
Okay,
Like,
no,
what's big
but if
thing,
it
right?
is small, then you can say, you can actually say, I'm upset, but you need not shout.
No, of course.
Do you understand? You can say, I'm upset about this for this reason. Then there is no problem with that. See, we create this scenario where as though our mind will never feel upset, it will never have, it's never going to be possible.
It disarms people when you say things like that. Like, okay, I'll say like, I'm upset about this and so I'm not going to do it. And that person will be like, what do you mean? I didn't want to be upset. I didn't think of doing it with that intention. Da da da. And then sometimes I mean, of course, we talked about this before. That okay, you don't rake everything up. You rake only what is important.
What is important to you?
So yeah, I guess you have to apply a
That
combination of the two and then
Absolutely.
decide what to do.
See, the thing is, unfortunately, what happens is that there are two problems here. One is the mind is so it's so not with realities that small things become very big, and the big things are disturbed in life. So that means that the small thing, but the impact for you is huge. In that, what is your work? To actually say, hey, is this response of mine, is it really worth what is?
Necessarily magnified to that.
Exactly. Have I really magnified, or is it really something which is important to you? That reflection actually you have to do. The second thing that we do is, suppose it's really important for us and we try to say, oh, it's not. We try to convince ourselves that it is not. That also is a problem. So we have two problems. One is small things become very big and we don't realize that. We start thinking that they are very big. The other thing is things are big for us and they matter to us and we try to tell them they don't matter. So that means somewhere along the line, the integrity or the clarity of mind is sacrificed. Because if you have done it several times, the mind begins to be confused about what is really important, what is not important, and everything looms large and seems important, but actually you need to think about it. Or things are important and you're trying to convince yourself it's not important. So it creates multiple confusions. Right? So that means that you need to do a little bit, unless you do that. And that first is that response cannot come from the force of anger or force of being upset, because that actually doesn't serve either the other person nor you. That's why. Right? It's not like somebody is telling you you should not do that. It doesn't serve you. Then you also feel bad later and they feel upset or whatever. Now the second process is what we call Shama. You can't only apply Dhamma because it's not complete. Right? What is Dhamma? I feel something. I acknowledge that I feel that, but I choose to not immediately act from that. And I choose my response and just say, even if you say I'm angry, I'm upset, it's okay. Right? But you don't start shouting. That is what we call Dhamma. Shama, in order for Dhamma to really get its depth, you need Shama. Shama is processing. Processing that, okay, I have this fear, and in this fear, what are the reasons? What are my stories? What are the things that I'm carrying forward? Is this small thing becoming very big for me? Or am I trying to hide? So that means all this reflection you need to do with reference to everything that you which matter to you, right? It's not like you sit and analyze for everything, you go crazy. But things that matter to you, you need to pass them through this analysis. So that discipline is called Shama. Okay? So Dhamma is your immediate response and Shama is certain processing which is required to put in perspective whatever you feel and try to see what are the causes, what could be the different causes, and then to correct. So that is correction, right? Samadhana. What is Samadhana? What does he explain as Samadhana? No. Read this. They just she just said. It's not nothing to do with Satchidananda. Samadhana.
Shama, can you just quickly read?
Okay. See, Dhamma is your immediate response.
Yeah.
And Shama is, okay, now I have chosen not to act out of fear, right? But that fear is still there, so looking into the causes of the fear. So that is called Shama. Okay, so that requires a little process.
Basically, you're trying to rationalize it. Like, see, this is a fear, but that doesn't mean I have to act like this. I can act like this. I mean, you mean.
No, that is included in Dhamma. What are the causes of this fear is Shama. It's going one step further, right? So that means this fear could be, there are several reasons. Small things appear very big to you. This is one reason for fear, right? The second reason for fear is the second way, the habitual pattern with which you have been dealing with fear is there, but you try to trivialize it and pretend that it is not there.
That's suppressing it. That's right.
Yeah, this is your habitual. That is your, it is not there. The third thing is, this fear may not be related to this situation at all. It may be what your, how as a child. So somebody told that my that person, they had so much fear, like, crossing the road, and simple things. The fear would be much more than others. And then she told me that when her grandmother had lost her kid, so this was so that fear of losing that kid was so ingrained in her that when she was a child, for every small thing she did, she tried to protect her. So that means now, as an adult, she also has got a lot of fears, because this is how her grandmother dealt with her, right? So that means that this could be because of certain past experiences. This may not be due to past experiences, this is just your own acquired pattern. Do you understand? So there are so many different reasons for your fear. In this case, you just manage that fear for now and you say, I'm not going to act out of fear. In this, you analyze. Do you understand? What are the different reasons that I have for this fear, and what are certain patterns that I have, and where do they come from? And this requires what? A correction at a deeper level. Do you see the difference between Dhamma and Shama? Dhamma is immediate response. I say, okay, I'm not going to, be inconsiderate to others because of the pressure of my emotion right now. That is one. That is Dhamma. Shama is, hey, let me look into what is actually going on with me when I have these responses, right? And in this, you can find so many different things that are going on with you. And depending upon what is going on with you, you need to do appropriate correction for that, right? This is how you actually nurture yourself. You don't give yourself a hard time. You don't create rules for yourself. You don't create this feeling of, oh, I'm trying so hard and I'm not getting there. Because it's all intelligent interventions to help yourself to actually become this person that you want to be. Right? Do you see that? Yeah. So that means this Dhamma, Shama and Samadhana. What was Samadhana? Rupa, you read it.
art of applying the mind consistently to a given pursuit.
Samadhana means this is all not just going to happen like that. There is a certain perseverance, right? Persistence. Certain persistence in this behavior. Otherwise, you'll say, yeah, but you know, the things are like that and everybody behaves like that. So how difficult it is? See, your mind itself will try to tell you, yeah, not to do it. So then you have to say that, hey, either I continue to be who I am and then suffer, or I sort myself out and I have to be persistent for that, right? And not just be complacent that, oh, you know. So this is what we call samadhi. So this is what ultimately, as a result of that, you move from this instinctive and habitual to deliberate and ultimately spontaneous. And that is what we call Atma Vinigna. Is it clear?
How do you process and come to that level? What is the process?
What?
For samadhi.
So
Discipline.
I just explained, no? Suppose I tell you. Sorry?
Discipline of.
No, it's not discipline. See, these processes I just explained, no? That any given fear, I can only give one example, but you have to apply that in your life, right? So I gave one example of what you just answered my question, because I need not repeat everything that I say again and again. So I gave the example of fear, and I told you what does it mean to process this fear. What did I say?
Any situation you are feeling is a problem, you break it down into the causes that could be causing that, and then you work on that and make sure
And
the
what
next
could
time
be
you're
different
looking
causes? What are the different examples
what
I
we
gave?
said is that it could be your past conditioning. It could be just that you made a small thing a big thing, and then it could be that you suppressed the reasons behind it. Right? Habitual. Yeah, because there are habitual thought. So there are three reasons that we gave for.
Right? So that means these, see, this gives you tools. When I give these, it gives you tools into how to look into, break it down, and this is what we call processing, right? And then you have to do it with reference to, first you need to identify what is it which is problem for you. That's your first job. But later on you have to process it, right? Is it clear? Yeah. So only when you do this,
So basically,
situation,
Dhamma is acknowledging it, accepting it. That is processing it, Shama.
it's not only accepting it, but at that given point in time, also not acting from that, acting on it. Two. It has two aspects: accepting
And then not acting.
and not acting on it. That is right now. But later on, it requires certain process.
And Samadhana is?
And the samadhana is being persistent in this exercise. Right? You can't say I've done it for 5 days, or you can't say I've done it for 10 days.
Accepting, not
It is-
acting, processing, everything.
Everything has to be for things that matter to you. As Anupa keeps saying, and that's so important, otherwise your self-growth project will become so huge and so unmanageable. So I'll tell you, what she said is very, very relevant. So, as when I first met Swamiji, and you have hundreds of thinking patterns and things which are not useful for you. So I went to Swamiji and I said, yes, but Swamiji, my mind is like this and like that. He said, don't worry about it. Really, he says, when you want to think about something, it has to be available to you. Rest of the time, don't worry about what. You can just let the thoughts go, because they are just transient thoughts. They are not capable of doing anything to you if you leave them alone. You understand? Only when you start wandering and building stories on them or taking them, then only they become a problem. So he says it's not like 24 hours your mind has to be all perfect and doing all the right things and totally in this mode where it is totally. He says leave it alone. Only when you want it, then it has to be available to you. Then it is so liberating, because you don't create this mental picture that I have to be this perfect human being who never does anything wrong. You go crazy trying to be this person. Right? So that means mind is what he says, monkey mind, it will have hundreds of different thoughts, sometimes fancies, sometimes some crazy, some funny things, and it's okay, it's like a show, right? In front of you, all these different thoughts and all that, only which don't serve you, and they affect you. They need to be corrected. Is it clear?
So when we used to say chitta ne ekagra karo, is your the chitta ekagra that is the same.
Okay, very good. Okay. Chitta ekagrata, that Chitta ekagrata that Rupa is talking about is, okay, slightly different connotation. In this,
So I was saying, it did not get
persistence is what, in this, samadhana was what, in this context.
Pursuit and persistence to get both, right?
Yeah, right? So that means that alertness, it requires that alertness not to act on this, the strength of that emotion at that given point in time, and then processing over a period of time, because if they don't get processed, then you can constantly stop, but they still remain your as your problems, right? Now, and samadhana in this case was in what? Doing this persistently, right? Now, chitta ekagrata, that Rupa is talking about, it is something which is generally our minds are what? Distracted, right? Distracted in the sense that suppose how many times, suppose I ask you, Preeti, how many times your mind wanders during the class? Right? And it's true. Because it's also not only is true for Preeti, thank God she's honest, right? Because somebody says, oh, I listen to every word of yours. It's not possible, right? Even though I really loved my teacher and I really wanted to know how many times the mind wanders, right? So that means that the mind wanders. The nature of mind is to wander, right?
Maybe a very distracted person, genuine, which I do, but I still can't just even for 20%.
It's good. That's good. So that means it's wonderful, right? So that means the nature of mind is to wander. There are few natures of the mind that you have to recognize. The nature of the mind is to wander. So don't have complexes for this. This is no human mind which is not like this, right? The second is what? As it wanders from one thought to another thought, it also has what we call associative thinking. So that means, suppose I ask you to do one chant, Om Namah Shivaya, right? You can chant, you will chant maybe 3 times. After that, it will go what? Oh, what is my son doing? Oh, what is there to be done now? Who all are the people that I have to see today? So what will happen is, it will wander off, right? So this is one attribute of the mind. The second attribute of the mind is, suppose she then Om Namah Shivaya, then she'll start thinking about what? Mount Kailash. Then she'll talk about, oh, Neeta went there. Then Neeta, oh, she got me that water from Mansarovar. So this is what we call associative thinking. So that means it's not like one thought to the other has no connection. It connects, but it connects through what? From sitting in Viresh's office and chanting Om Namah Shivaya, it has gone to Mount Kailash, it has gone to Neeta, it has gone to the water of Mansarovar. But it's not, it may seem totally unrelated, but the mind has found those connections, right? So this is what we call associative thinking, right? It's not just random thoughts, one thought to the other. They may not have logical connections, but your mind has found some connections, logic within it, and it is its own logic to move from one thought to the other, right? So now these two things are the biggest distraction, the things that keep us from doing and engaging things engaging in things with a certain depth. Suppose you are sitting in physics class or in music class and your mind keeps wandering. What happens? Your absorption level goes down. The depth of that knowledge is also sacrificed when that happens. The associative thinking actually creates a problem in another way. What is the problem that associative thinking creates? A small thing can become very big for us, one pattern that we saw. A small thing can make very big for us when a little external stimuli, we use our associative thinking and build on it and make it really big. Do you understand? Very common.
Even
So-
in relationships it happens.
In relationships, it happens the most. Not even in the relationship, it happens the most. That's why we are so hurt. We are so feeling so bad. We take.
If X person says something to you, you'll be okay with it. But if Y person says the same thing to you,
But it's not okay.
because you have all that build up.
Exactly. Right. So that means this associative thinking is something which creates the impact of that situation, which is there. We are not trying to deny, but the magnitude that it assumes in your mind is this multifold. Right? So this is a pattern of the mind, and that is a hard. You have to bring it. What we are not saying this. The mind should not see it this, but also it has to see it as the same and not magnified. Do you understand? So this associative thinking also. Through chanting of japa, because one chant is the same as the other chant. So the first chant is what? Om Namah Shivaya. The second chant is not about Kailasha. Second chant is also Om Namah Shivaya. The third chant is also Om Namah Shivaya. It makes the mind more deliberate and less building on things. Building on things is not wrong. Please don't think building on things is wrong. Sometimes all our learning takes place like that, right? When somebody teaches you math, first they'll teach you math, then building on that, the person will teach you what? Arithmetic, then calculus. So it is all built, right? You build on but in this case, the building is not systematic and logical. It is just through stories which impacts us and makes us suffer, makes us, people who are not able to cope with external situations. So that means this practice of japa that we do in order to check two tendencies of mind. One is wandering tendency of mind, and the associative thinking is called chitta ekagrata. So now to answer your question, now you answer for me, how much this samadhana relates to this chitta ekagrata and how much it does not?
Really related and really, but for me, samadhan also meant something else for me totally. Today, means something else. When generally it was always okay, you did this something or mala samadhan matla, how I felt whatever. That does not makes it. That is a very different.
See, unfortunately, what happens is we use many of these words in our Gujarati language, in Hindi language, in Marathi language, with a very different meanings, right? Now, in Vedanta, these words are technical words. They are used in a very specific manner, right? So this is why sometimes when you read all of this, it seems, yeah, I understand, but actually the meaning that you carry is very different from. So like there is a word called upadhi, right? Upadhi is a very technical word in Vedanta, where it says, okay, there is a form and there is an appearance, and the truth of it is something else. Upahita is something else. Upadhi for us is like a problem. Right? So that means now suppose you try to use your meaning and apply it to Vedanta, what will happen is it will create. That's why.
Chitta ekagrata means
All your-
what is wandering
Wandering.
and
mind.
your association. Then how does that apply to chitta?
That's what I'm saying.
Chitta, mind ne badhu saathi.
Chitta is mind.
Right.
in this case. Ekagrata is to bring it into focus. Right? Now samadhana is also similar. Which aspect will you, which aspect applies here?
So you need chitta ekagrata to be persistent.
Okay. And in this persistence, there are persistence in Dhamma and Shama. Right? To use that
Because if you don't have
persistence,
chitta ekagrata, then even when you're trying to be persistent, you will actually be
be all over the
all over the
place.
place.
Right. So they are related, right? But here it is applying this chitta ekagrata in this context specifically, right? Here you can use it for so many other things also, right? Chitta ekagrata, you can use it not only to correct this, you can use it to study Vedanta deeply, to figure out realities. So that means chitta ekagrata is a much larger thing where you can use it once you have a mind which is non-wandering mind and it stays with facts, that you can use in multiple situations. In this context, you use it to gain mastery over your mind, which requires being alert about what is the thought and then not acting from it, and over a period of time what processing where this thought comes from and correcting it.
So it's similar to awareness. Awareness is very general.
See, awareness is very general because awareness need not lead to action, right? So here we are not only, it starts with awareness, then it doesn't end with awareness. It ends with making deliberate attempt to find out where exactly is your distortion, undoing those distortions. All that is required before that from habitual you come to deliberate, and from deliberate to spontaneous. Actually using that awareness to bring about changes in yourself.
So actually awareness is also a very wide term. It means a lot of things, including this, if you take it like that.
Well, yeah, it doesn't, for me when I hear the word awareness, it just seems like, yeah, okay, you have to be aware, which is true. And that is, I would say that's a first starting point. But ultimately it requires a lot more effort and lot of targeted efforts.
Deliberate awareness.
Exactly. And then deliberate, because you can be very aware that, oh, my life is whatever. There are so many people who are now becoming very aware that I'm passive, that they were not even aware of before. But to become from passive to proactive is yet another journey, right? So that means one thing is to be aware, second is translating that awareness into change of behavior is a yet another.
So layers and layers and layers of awareness.
There are layers and layers.
Of awareness.
Yeah, but it's only awareness followed by certain concrete actions and effort on your part.
Peeling away the layers
You know,
of awareness. Of truth.
So there are a lot of people who are highly aware, but they are unable to follow up and actually do things concretely to support that change.
Obviously, they're not.
So all these people, for example, there are people who they don't think that.
No, obviously
No,
it's
one
not
second,
like
just
this.
can I finish? Just 1 minute. There are people who just say, oh no, I want to smoke and that doesn't matter. And they are in denial that, okay, what are the problems? Then there are people who are aware who say, oh no, smoking is not good for me and I really need to get over. But between that awareness and actually freeing yourself from that addiction is a long process. You understand? It can't stop only at awareness.
So that awareness is only intellectual. It's more understanding. Yeah.
Every awareness only can happen in the mind. So
when you say deep awareness is when you actually make it work for you, and then you can't.
see, one is a function of mind. But we use words. We are used to using words, not precisely. And this whole Vedanta is a discipline to begin
Make it
to
even more.
make the use of words are very, very precise, very, very specific. That actually there is a lot of my teachers said every word I say, no word I just say like that. There is so much intent behind every word that you say that you are careful about what you are saying, because see, every awareness can it happen in body? It only can happen in the mind. There is no other place where awareness takes place, right? It only can happen in the mind. Your mind can become awareness, but there is aware. But the actions are not only at the level of mind. The actions require your body. It requires participation of other limbs also. Do you understand? So this is why we don't use the word awareness for action. Awareness happens at the level of the mind, and actions follow, which don't always, the origin is the mind, but then other limbs get involved. Is it clear? So everything can only remain very clear at the level of mind, but it never actually follows
So
through.
what I'm saying is that awareness which doesn't spur you
Translate.
into action is not full awareness. It's more a conceptual sort of understanding which is not.
Or you may choose not to
I
act.
think, yeah, you can be aware and still kind of
No,
not
no,
do
when
anything
you
about it.
know something is harmful for you and you're still not acting.
So that's why, Bobby, one is process of the mind, the other is what? The other is the
Putting that
into
into action.
practice, which requires not only mind, but it requires body, it requires many other things. That's why we don't use the same word.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in English, they just have this one word which just comes close. That's the.
This is why I see when I give all these very long explanation of what exactly, if I reduce it again back to awareness,
Yeah,
it loses all its depth. You see what I mean? Because it again comes back to the same thing. You have to be aware. Now, okay, yeah, you have to be aware, but all the tools that are given, all the breakdown that is given, it's all lost. When we again summarize
There's
it,
no point.
there's no point in doing that, right? It's like oversimplifying something,
we're
right?
not
And not
seeing.
seeing the depth of things, right?
This
That's
is not
what.
to find another word in English for.
Exactly, right? Because this is a very long process and a very precise, and it has many, many different steps, right? So this is why. And that one word may not do justice to the whole thing which is being taught. That's why. I mean, as a teacher, I have to do that, right? I have to do that. Is it clear? Okay.